The yard is going quiet. One by one, the sounds drop out. The sparrows first, then the jays. Then the distant traffic noise seems to matter less. And your cardinal is still there, not eating, not calling, not watching for anything you can identify. Just still, completely, unnervingly still on that branch, as if the world has issued an instruction he received and you did not. You probably assumed he was resting, winding down, that the stillness was the absence of activity. A 2022 study by researchers at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology proved it is the opposite. That stillness is one of the most computationally dense states a bird can enter, and it runs on a biological clock so precise it makes your phone's GPS look approximate. What is your cardinal actually executing in those frozen minutes before dark? And here is the question underneath that question. Why do some individual cardinals perform this ritual with extraordinary precision every single evening, while others of the same species, in the same yard, almost never do it at all? Stay with that, because the answer connects to something in his biology that has no fully agreed upon scientific explanation. For most of recorded ornithology, the assumption about pre-dusk bird stillness was intuitive and wrong. Birds were understood to be diurnal creatures operating on a simple on-off cycle, active in daylight, passive at night, with the transition period being nothing more than behavioral deceleration. The assumption felt airtight because it matched the observable evidence. The bird stops moving. The bird goes quiet. The bird roosts. To an observer, this looks like a creature powering down. That model began cracking in the 1980s when researchers studying circadian biology in songbirds noticed that the metabolic signature of pre-dusk stillness looked nothing like rest. In resting birds, heart rate drops, muscle activity decreases, and core temperature begins its overnight decline. In birds entering pre-dusk stillness, the pattern was reversed. Heart rate elevated slightly. Neural firing in the hippocampus, the brain region managing spatial memory, increased measurably. Cortisol levels, the hormone associated with alertness and threat response priming, spiked in a controlled, rhythmic pattern. The bird looked still on the outside. On the inside, it was running a multi-system pre-flight check that no researcher had previously thought to look for. The stillness was not the end of the day's cognition. It was the most cognitively active moment in it. In 2022, researchers at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology fitted free-ranging northern cardinals with miniaturized biologgers, devices small enough to attach to the bird's back, feathers without affecting flight. That recorded simultaneous data streams, heart rate, body temperature, GPS position to within 2 meters, and ambient light levels. The study ran across 2 full seasons, tracking 41 individual birds across 11 territories in upstate New York. What the data showed demolished the deceleration model completely. In the 60 to 90-minute window before civil twilight, the period when the sun sits between 6 degrees above and 6 degrees below the horizon, every tracked cardinal entered a behavioral state the Cornell team designated as pre-roost vigilance consolidation. During this window, each bird returned to between 3 and 7 specific locations within its territory in a fixed sequence. The same locations, the same sequence, every single evening. Then it went completely still at the final location, always a position with unobstructed sightlines in at least 3 directions, and remained motionless for an average of 11 minutes before moving to its roost. The stillness was the last step of a navigation protocol. It was not the absence of behavior. It was the completion of one. To understand what your cardinal is actually processing during those 11 minutes, you have to step into a sensory system running at a bandwidth you cannot access. At the moment, he locks onto that final pre-roost perch. His vestibular system, the 3 fluid-filled semicircular canals in his inner ear, performs a full positional calibration. He can detect rotational acceleration to within 0.4 degrees, roughly 4 times finer than human vestibular sensitivity. And in those first seconds of stillness, he is establishing his precise orientation in 3-dimensional space relative to every landmark in his territory. Simultaneously, his visual system, operating across 4 cone types, including ultraviolet, is reading the fading light spectrum and cross-referencing it against an internal light calibration model that has been built and updated over every dusk of his adult life. He knows exactly how much usable light remains, not approximately, exactly, to a precision that a light meter would struggle to match. His hippocampal place cells, the same neural structures that won the 2014 Nobel Prize when discovered in mammals, are firing in sequence, refreshing the 3-dimensional coordinates of every roost site, every predator approach vector, every shelter position he will need to navigate in complete darkness within the next 20 minutes. The stillness is not passivity. It is the moment his entire spatial operating system writes its nightly backup. Here is where the biology becomes genuinely difficult to explain. The pre-roost consolidation protocol your cardinal runs does not require external cues to trigger. In a 2018 study by Dr. Barbara Helm at the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology, songbirds held in artificially stable light conditions. No sunrise, no sunset, no natural light variation whatsoever, continued executing their pre-roost behavioral sequences on an approximately 24-hour cycle for weeks. Remove the external clock entirely. The internal one keeps running. This circannual and circadian timing is governed by a cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN, which in birds functions as a master pacemaker synchronized, not just by light, but by at least 3 independent input channels: retinal photoreceptors, pineal gland photoreception, and deep brain photoreceptors that detect light penetrating directly through the skull. Your cardinal has light sensors inside his brain. When Helm's team blocked all 3 input channels simultaneously, the SCN still maintained its rhythm for several cycles before drifting. The source of that residual rhythm, what is actually generating the base oscillation before any external calibration, remains a subject of active research. Dr. Helm's own published conclusion was careful. The data proves the clock exists and runs independently. It does not yet fully explain what wins it. Your cardinal's pre-roost consolidation does not happen in isolation. A 2016 study by researchers at the British Trust for Ornithology tracked mixed species assemblages in garden territories across southern England and found a consistent pattern. In yards where a dominant songbird, cardinal equivalent species in the UK study, performed regular, precise, pre-roost stillness sequences, subordinate species in the same territory synchronized their own pre-roost timing to within an average of 4 minutes of the dominant bird's consolidation window. The dominant bird was functioning as a biological pacemaker for the entire yard community. Other species were reading his behavioral cues and calibrating their own roost preparation accordingly. This matters because roost timing errors carry survivorship consequences. Birds that enter roost positions too early miss late feeding windows. Birds that enter too late navigate to roost in degraded light conditions. When predator risk, particularly from owls and cats, spikes sharply. The cardinal's pre-roost precision is not just a personal survival behavior. It is environmental information that every other species in your yard is actively using. When he goes still on that branch before dark, he is not just preparing himself. He is setting the clock for every bird that has been watching him. The cardinal at your feeder is running this exact system tonight. And there are specific things you can observe that tell you whether his pre-roost consolidation is functioning at full capacity or showing signs of stress-induced degradation. A 2020 study by Dr. Donna Maney at Emory University established that male northern cardinals experiencing chronic territorial stress from window strike loops, from predator proximity, from feeder competition, showed measurably reduced pre-roost sequence precision. The number of pre-roost site visits dropped. The sequence became less consistent. The final stillness period shortened from an average of 11 minutes to under 4. And critically, the spatial consistency of the sites he chose degraded. A healthy cardinal visits the same locations in the same order every evening. A stressed cardinal approximates. His roost preparation becomes imprecise in direct proportion to the neurological load his stress hormones are imposing on hippocampal function. So if you have been watching your cardinal go still before dark and noticed that some evenings the ritual feels shorter, more scattered, less deliberate, you are not imagining it. You're reading a live output of his neurological condition. The yard is the display screen. The pre-roost sequence is the readout. Return now to the question from the opening. Why do some individual cardinals execute this pre-roost ritual with extraordinary daily precision, while others in the same yard perform it inconsistently or barely at all? The Cornell 2022 dataset provided a partial answer that nobody in the popular science press has reported on. Of the 41 birds tracked, 12 showed what the researchers designated high-fidelity consolidators, birds whose pre-roost sequence was consistent to within 90 seconds and 3 meters, evening after evening, across both seasons. 22 showed moderate fidelity. 7 showed what the team called degraded or absent consolidation patterns. When the researchers cross-referenced these behavioral profiles against the bird's territory quality, foraging success, and stress hormone baselines, one factor correlated more strongly than any other with high-fidelity consolidation. Not territory size, not feeder access, not competition level. Age and cumulative navigational experience. The birds running the most precise pre-roost protocols were not necessarily the strongest or the most dominant. They were the ones who had been doing it the longest, whose hippocampal place cell networks had been built and refined through the most accumulated evenings of practice. The pre-roost consolidation improves with repetition. The birds you watch going perfectly still before dark, evening after evening with clockwork precision. Those birds have been alive long enough to get very good at staying alive. Return now to the question from the opening. Why do some individual cardinals execute this pre-roost ritual with extraordinary daily precision, while others in the same yard perform it inconsistently or barely at all? The Cornell 2022 dataset provided a partial answer that nobody in the popular science press has reported on. Of the 41 birds tracked, 12 showed what the researchers designated high-fidelity consolidators, birds whose pre-roost sequence was consistent to within 90 seconds and 3 meters, evening after evening, across both seasons. 22 showed moderate fidelity. 7 showed what the team called degraded or absent consolidation patterns. When the researchers cross-referenced these behavioral profiles against the bird's territory quality, foraging success, and stress hormone baselines, one factor correlated more strongly than any other with high-fidelity consolidation. Not territory size, not feeder access, not competition level. Age and cumulative navigational experience. The birds running the most precise pre-roost protocols were not necessarily the strongest or the most dominant. They were the ones who had been doing it the longest, whose hippocampal place cell networks had been built and refined through the most accumulated evenings of practice. The pre-roost consolidation improves with repetition. The birds you watch going perfectly still before dark, evening after evening with clockwork precision. Those birds have been alive long enough to get very good at staying alive.